And welcome everybody to the September edition of Sapphire Nation Live. I'm your host, SAPPHIRE Ed, and joining me on our podcast is none other than the man himself, Buildzoid.
Hello. Thanks for
Well,
having me on.
welcome. You've got quite a following, not just here, obviously. And so there's a lot of stuff I want to get into with you, but let's start with a little background. How did you get into looking at the component level of boards?
So, I built my first PC um, in like high school. Yeah, like start of high school. I built my first PC,
Now, how long ago was that?
and that was like 2012. Yeah,
Okay,
like so not that long ago relative to some people. Um, but yeah, so I built built my first PC, and I used an ROG motherboard from Asus. And so as a side effect of that, I sort of saw all of the like overclocking stuff that like Asus was, and I guess they're still kind of promoting it. I've not been paying attention to their website that much, but back in the day, they were pretty heavy on the sort of extreme overclocking stuff, and so I thought that was super cool, and I wanted to get into it, but I ran into a problem of actually the GPU that I had at the time was just terrible in terms of actual like component build quality. Um, and so when I found out that that's an actual concern when getting into that level of overclocking, that sort of led to me just wanting to learn more and more and more about power delivery and just like what makes like a good graphics card, what makes a good motherboard, and so that you're not entirely dependent on on like motherboard reviews. And I remember like if I go back through old reviews today, like a lot of them really aren't that great in my opinion, because it feels like a lot of the reviewers back in the day, if a manufacturer told them, "Hey, this is a phase," then they just kind of ran with it, even if it wasn't necessarily true. So yeah, that's sort of the backstory to how I got into sort of the like really into the hardware side of the computer hardware, like the deep end of it, I guess.
well,
It's kind of weird to say.
I think the thing you're most known for is when you look at a PCB and you look at the power delivery setup,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you spend a lot of time discussing that. And I've had a lot of discussions with people about this. Now, you've made very clear more than once that you're talking extreme overclocking in a lot of the things you're looking at, correct?
Yes.
And that's something that I want to address here right now because a lot of people, when they look at motherboards, and I can give you some specific examples of this, they get so caught up in the VRM that they don't realize it may not apply for what they're going to do. And
Yeah.
I wanted to get your take on this. I'll give you a perfect example, and then I want to get your take on it. Um, Gigabyte B450, and you said numerous times that you didn't like the VRM solution on it. You thought the cooling was a little weak. But when
And
I
I
look,
also don't like I don't like the way those boards handle voltage control. But like if you're running them at stock, that none of that is relevant.
and well,
Like
even
it
even a
doesn't
light
matter.
overclock, it's not that relevant. It's not till you start
Um,
pushing it. But what
well, I guess my definition of light overclock and yours might vary quite a bit.
that could that could be.
To me, light is anything like if it can be cooled with a water cooling setup, it's light. If it needs more cooling than that, that's when it's not a light overclock anymore, you know? So,
Okay,
um,
to me, a light overclock is anything that needs no voltage adjustment and can run on a
that's
stock
not even
cooler.
overclocking in my book. So,
So
yeah.
anyway, though, back to the example, it was amazing to me. I watched the community, and they all coalesced around the MSI B5 or B450 ITX board. But when I compared those boards, now take overclocking out of the
So,
mix, the
So
the
actually, Gigabyte's B450 ITX wasn't that bad, if I remember correctly. My main problem was the ATX boards.
okay,
Like, there's this really funny um, thing with motherboards where, like, ATX boards, because they have all this extra real estate, will often have worse build quality because you don't need to use, or more like worse component quality because you don't need to use high-end components to get like low board space usage, right?
right.
Um, so ITX boards are often really like for a given price tag, they often come with much higher end components than their equivalently priced counterparts from the same manufacturer in a larger form factor because if you tried to build an ITX board with that, it just wouldn't work.
Well,
So,
there is that, but it was always weird to me, that conversation, because when you looked at those two boards, when you compared the MSI and the Gigabyte had better onboard sound, had better onboard network connectivity, had the M.2 slot on the top of the board with a cooler instead of on the back of the board. From a feature set point of view, the Gigabyte board was a much better board. But people were like, the enthusiast community, and I'm air quoting when I say that, they were screaming, oh my God, if you don't buy the MSI, you're getting junk because the VRMs weren't as strong. And the reason I wanted to address that with you is you've actually said what I'm saying. You've said, I'm talking extreme overclocking. In normal everyday use, this isn't as important.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Like
so,
this is one thing that kind of bugs me because I regularly get people, asking me for like motherboard recommendations. And like the thing is, I think they just don't like have other features to focus on. And so for whatever reason, I get a lot of I still don't get why so many people watch my content. I'm glad that they do, but I honestly haven't figured out why. Um,
I'm an old
because
school geek, brother. I go back to the days when we were soldering and desoldering all the time. In fact, you had to overclock.
Yeah, I've heard as much, but I started in like 2012, so by that time, at that point, things were a lot easier. But yeah, no, like I think a lot of people just don't consider the other features of a motherboard, and I think I mentioned in my videos, or more like I just kind of assume that like if you care about audio or if you care about other functionality on a motherboard, you're gonna go look for that from some other reviewer,
I
right? Because when I got into this, like I always saw like the part of the motherboard I most care about, which was basically just the power delivery. And then I have some basic requirements for like I want more than four SATA ports and I want more than like six USB ports in the
right.
back. If I'm talking about like a motherboard for my own personal system. Um, but aside from that, I literally couldn't care less what the rest of the motherboard looks like. So um, basically my content is sort of really geared towards sort of my interests in hardware and yeah, I just figured like you would go to some other reviewer for like the audio section and all the other feature set stuff that I just don't care about because I basically saw it as like most reviews don't actually cover the power delivery in as much depth as I like it to be covered in, and so I just sort of only covered that and was like, well, the other stuff seems covered well enough, or at least like I don't care about it, so I can't judge if it's covered well enough. But I don't see an issue to try fix there.
I think a
So
lot with, in my opinion, with motherboards and with video cards, build quality outside of VRMs seems like it never gets discussed. And
yeah, well, if we say that if you take the audio section, like there's definitely some way to test that. It's just
yes,
I've all like I use an external sound card, right? And if I wanted better sound, I'm just getting a better external sound card. I'm not gonna go look for better onboard audio. Um,
that's a
but
shame because some of the onboard audio really isn't bad now. They've made a lot of headway.
yeah, but I don't test it, so I
There
wouldn't
you
know.
go. But you see,
Like
that's
that's the thing is like I don't test it, I wouldn't know, and like like it is a flaw of my in my coverage, but I feel like I can't like I don't want to try cover everything there is to cover. Um, so yeah, like I'm really quite happy to just be specialized in sort of the. I also cover memory overclocking, but you don't really cover that in the like I don't really cover that heavily in the PCB breakdowns because you really do need practical testing for that. Um, but yeah, like I'm pretty happy to just only focus on basically like the CPU socket section of the motherboard.
yeah.
Whatever's around that is just kind of like it exists, I guess.
When you look at video cards and motherboards today, and I'm going to ask this question in a way so it applies to everyone. Take overclocking out of the mix for a minute. Have you seen in a modern video card or a motherboard a design that is just so god awful you have to say, no, don't buy this?
Reference GTX 980 Ti's.
Oh my goodness, there we go.
Simply on the basis that, like, if you find a dead one on eBay, the probability that the VRM exploded is incredibly high.
Wow.
Like, I have a GTX Titan X Maxwell where the bottom power, and it's always one of these two power stages. You basically have actually there's sort of a couple failures that happens on those cards, but it's an NVIDIA reference design, so like I don't know what anybody expected. Um, So bottom power stage for vCore likes to blow up. The power stage directly above that likes to blow up as well. The entire memory VRM likes to just destroy itself
Wow.
in a very bizarre fashion. It seems to burn up the inductors, which is like I've never seen that on any other hardware, where it's just like the inductors are gone and the rest of it's fine.
That's crazy.
And yeah, and like so that would be like an extreme like that would be my example of like the really terrible build quality. But then you also have like the GTX 590, which was like an even worse variation of basically that. Except with the GTX 590, Nvidia sort of completely locked those cards down after they had like an initial round of a few of them like up and dying during overclocking. So those cards are incredibly locked down at this point from the drivers. But yeah, 980 Ti is like once they go out of the warranty, like and then the core is so big that it likes to thermal cycle. It's to thermal cycle to death, but that's not really a design flaw. That's just inherent to
Right.
really big pieces of silicon. With GPUs is just really big GPUs just don't last as long as the smaller cards. But that really only starts being an issue once you get into like 5 years plus old cards, and that's the ones where it's like, oh, you get artifacting or card just doesn't work for no apparent reason. But yeah, it's not super common. And on the AMD side, I'd say it's actually just straight up rare that you'd have a card that's actually built really badly.
Well, AMD,
But
you see less reference design. You tend to see more partner boards.
yeah,
Could
well,
that be
also
part
like
of that?
I think AMD specs the reference boards a bit better than Nvidia does.
Okay, you heard it here
At
first,
least they
folks.
used to. Currently, I'd say like 10, like basically since the 1080 Ti, I'd say Nvidia really stepped up the baseline of what a reference card is for them. Because and actually, it's funny you can compare a 1080 Ti to a Titan X, the original Titan X Pascal card, and the 1080 Ti has literally twice as many MOSFETs in the VRM. It's the same VRM layout, except on the on that original Titan X Pascal card, because they re-released that Titan as well, which is super annoying because, anyway, basically they doubled the current capacity of the 1080 Ti PCB compared to the original Titan X. And it's just like, and since then, I've not really seen any NVIDIA PCBs where I've been like, okay, this is like concerning for how expensive this card is. But yeah, before that, it was like most reference NVIDIA PCBs were like built within, 20% of the stock power draw, which
Wow.
basically translates your lifespan is really miserable. because obviously the components as you like if you run them at that close to what they're rated for, like they're just not going to last as long. Um, and so yeah, but a 980 Ti's I think are sort of the worst,
So
along with the Maxwell Titans. And really all of the like actually there's like a line of cards from Nvidia that basically all shares the same basic design. But yeah, so those are terrible. Um, but
so
other than that,
let's give the users a nutshell then. Is it safe to say if you're not planning to overclock, don't worry about the VRMs?
um, yeah, like for if you're buying something new right now, sure.
Okay.
If
Well,
you're buying
something
if you're buying cards on eBay, I would just avoid reference Nvidia.
there you go. There you go. Um
Reference 980 Ti's is just like I wouldn't like I'm surprised that those things still run, honestly, with how many I've seen that are just dead. Um, so those are kind of like yeah, but new
um
cards I would not be concerned. Well, there's some of the lower end 30 series where some of the board partners seem to be really pushing the limit of what is like acceptable, but Nvidia's gotten a lot better about implementing much stricter like power controls as well. So I don't think you would run into any issues with that.
um
Um,
we got to ask a question because you just referred to shortening the lifespan when it comes to a graphics card if you have a poor power delivery. What about a motherboard? Is it basically the same thing with the motherboard?
Basically, yes, except it's like the thing is CPUs don't pull as much power, and they're also like typically people who, you know, have a CPU, they don't use it like they use a GPU. Right? Like if you have a 980 Ti or a high-end graphics card of any kind, there's a very high probability that that card spends a, you know, significant portion of its lifespan at like 100% utilization. And so in terms of power draw, it's going to be hitting, you know, 300 watts. Somewhere between two, well, actually now we're going to be, you know, these days 300 plus, but you know, somewhere around 300 watts for a high-end graphics card is not really an uncommon level of power draw. Whereas if you compare that to a motherboard, if your CPU it was pulling, you know, let's say you played games 5 hours a day. If your CPU was on that kind of load cycle, I think motherboard failures would be way more common. But nobody really does that. Like that's like servers, you know, and data centers where that actually sort of becomes a concern, where they're going to be running their CPUs at 100% for extended
Right.
periods of time. Whereas most people, like you have your like, you know, you have a 6 core CPU, you're probably not going to hit 100% utilization on that thing very frequently at all. Um, and then once you get into the really high core count chips, it's like with a lot of people who have those CPUs, I suspect they barely ever go past using half of them.
Yeah,
So
that is something I saw. Um, I've seen a couple of pundits talk about this where they're telling people that are looking to buy a new system, and they're telling them don't get a 6 core. You need to get an 8 core. You need to get a 12 core. Really, that's dependent upon usage. If you can't make regular use, not just now and then for a burst, if you're not making regular use of those extra threads, you wasted a lot of money.
yeah, like that right now for the price difference between like a 5600X and a 5950X, like that's a GPU class
Yeah.
step. Like, and if you don't like if you basically don't do like video encoding regularly or 3D rendering or something, like you could have literally like assuming you're a gamer, you could have literally had just a way better GPU.
or or
Um,
or a faster SSD or a better keyboard, a better mouse,
yeah,
better cooling
yeah.
solution.
Any other number of things could have been upgraded for that much. Actually, you could probably upgrade several things at
And they would all have a
the
more
same time.
significant impact on your gaming
Yep.
experience. The argument falls apart. I'm telling this to the audience. I'm sure you get this. The argument falls apart on a lot of things that have done this over the years. To me, the classic example when we go back and we look at the move by Intel to attempt to push triple and quad channel memory as mainstream, and it's faster than dual channel. Okay, nobody's saying it's not faster. It has a bigger bandwidth than dual channel. But the problem was it was really specific use case scenarios that you could fill that bandwidth. And if you can't fill that bandwidth, the extra performance is meaningless.
Did Intel actually push that for mainstream? Because like my experience with like I don't know about X58 because that's before I was
Oh
into
no, you
computer
got to yeah,
hardware.
you got to go back a ways. You got to go
Yeah,
back a ways, but they did try
I
to say the
got in on
enthusiast should buy it.
X79. I got in on X79, which was quad channel. But that was HEDT. So I'm
Yeah, that's when they began to move it away. They tried for a while to push that to the enthusiast market in the more mainstream approach. They wanted you to get triple channel. They were pushing triple channel really hard. It was a neat idea. Rambus was a neat idea. Even HBM to an extent has kind of the same problem. It's not that HBM isn't amazing. It is compared to what we have right now. It's that nothing we do fills it. And if you can't
I
fill the
feel like
pipeline,
HBM's problem. I feel like because so with CPUs, the memory utilization thing gets really weird because you sort of have like you have workloads like say Cinebench, right?
yeah,
Which is based on the Cinema 4D rendering software. So for people who are like that's synthetic, no, that's actually rendering software.
yes,
But it barely uses the memory. Like if you've ever run like Cinebench does not care about memory speed basically at all. And then you have you know. Uh, so for something like that, like quad channel is just not going to make a difference. And then you have like really heavy math, AVX accelerated sort of like scientific compute workloads, and those suck up memory bandwidth like no tomorrow. But they're also super niche, right? Like literally, like scientific compute, like they're basically the kind of thing you'd actually want to run on a GPU.
right.
Because GPUs are designed to have a lot of memory bandwidth to begin with.
Well, that
Um,
they're designed to really expand out that parallel processing to the ridiculous extreme.
yeah.
There's only one. I saw a demo by Kingston. This has been about 10, 12 years ago, and they were showing using lots of fast memory, the advantage of lots of fast memory. So to do this, they had this, and I'm not joking when I say this. They had a rail system. It looked like something that your model train would sit on, and there was a little cart and a camera, and the little
Okay.
cart would move like a quarter inch, take a picture, quarter inch, take a picture. These were all super high resolution pictures. And then once they had finished, they'd have like 1,000 pictures of something from all these different angles. And then they would take software and combine these to give you a super high def picture of what they were taking a picture of. And they were showing how all that memory, all that really fast memory came into play. I don't know too many people that are going to do that.
Yeah, like that's exactly the kind of niche workload where yes, you need a ton of memory bandwidth, but that's what we have like Threadrippers for and Epic, you know. So, like, yeah, that's server territory basically.
Okay,
Um,
let's move into some fun stuff here. Um,
sure.
what do you do with your computer? What's your daily use? Do you game? Do you just use it
I
for productivity? What do you do?
I play a lot of games. Like, I don't edit video at all, right? So so outside of like, well, I use it for streaming, and the computer actually handles all the video recording. But I don't actually edit on it. And recording with OBS is like surprisingly light. Even like I actually pulled up the CPU. Like I have a 3950X right now, um, and yeah, I pulled up OBS while live streaming, and it was at like 30% utilization, and that was with all of the usual crap open in the background for me. So yeah,
What
like
what's your
my
big
PC
game?
is really overweight for what I do with it. And then primarily I play games when I'm not, streaming or recording videos for the channel.
What's your
Um,
game right now? Your go-to game?
um, No, I've been playing kind of a lot of Cruelty Squad,
I'm not
which is
familiar with
like
that
this.
game. I gotta go check it out now.
It's really wacky. it's uh, it's basically it looks like a troll game. Um, it's a lot deeper than that, but basically it's an assault on the senses when you first first try to play it. Um, and then eventually that kind of wears off and you get used to it. But like I primarily like shooters. And so this was kind of, but the thing is I like sort of faster paced, um fast paced, not very like arena shooters basically.
Okay.
So and Cruelty Squad is sort of this, like, it's not even an arena shooter, but it still has that really really fast pace that I really like in games. And yeah, it also will run on a potato, which is
That's
kind of
important.
like that's kind of the like that's what I've noticed with most of the games I play, is like they'll just kind of run on everything. With maybe the exception of like PlanetSide 2, but that doesn't run on anything.
Yeah, I
That has the
just
opposite problem. It's one of those MMOs that's just horribly optimized because it's an MMO, so it just
you're right.
never runs properly.
I just
Um,
recently took a step backwards and went back, started playing Watch Dogs Legion,
oh,
and I'm really enjoying it. There's something about being a hacktivist that's just fun, and so that's the game that's sucking up my time right now. Unfortunately, it does not. It needs a little more than a potato.
yeah. The thing with like triple A games for me is just I feel like I've seen a like for me the important part of a game is always the gameplay. Like if
Right.
it doesn't feel good to play, then I honestly don't really care about the rest of the game that much. Um, so yeah, like that's I guess also why I can tolerate games that look like Cruelty Squad, where the like graphically that game is intentionally as ugly to look at as possible. But it plays really well. Like the mechanics are really solid, the movement's really solid, the guns feel satisfying to shoot. Um, and so that's sort of like, and basically, if the game does that, then everything else is sort of secondary to me a lot of the time. And with AAA games, I've just kind of found them to be very samey and also expensive. Like that's another thing, is like I'm
I
not
get
really
that.
a fan of spending, $60 dollars on a game. Um, so that sort of also really leads towards me basically playing a lot of indie games. Um, so
Nothing
that
wrong with that. I'm going to
yeah.
jump back here. One of the questions, well, one of the comments was made when we were talking about audio. I'm a decoy said most of the best headsets are USB now. Um, I'm going to really argue that point. The Sennheiser EPOS headsets are all analog. Um, I think Bear Dynamics makes a gaming headset that's analog. These are the best gaming headsets. You even go back to the Cloud series from HyperX, which is arguably one of the best values in headsets as analog. Cooler Master, I can't remember what the model is, but they make a $50 headset that's won a bunch of awards, is analog. It seems to me like the better headsets tend to be analog. So, and I mean, you're running an external sound card, so it would sounds like you'd kind of agree with that.
Except I run speakers. So
Speakers, oh my God, no, okay, your geek card
well,
has to be
actually, I use
revoked.
studio monitors that are sideways, but which is you're not supposed to use them like that. But I can't get them to fit around the monitor otherwise because I have a triple monitor setup. So yeah, they're
Um,
just kind of jammed awkwardly under the main ultra wide. Um, but yeah,
hey,
I don't like.
speaking of ultra wide, I've got a list of little topics if we needed something to discuss. I think you'll get a kick out of this too. Have you seen the? And it keeps rearing its ugly head. There's a lot of misinformation about ultra wides that get put out, but the one that always recurs is going ultra wide means you lose vertical space. And it's crazy.
I don't get that argument.
Yeah, the argument. Okay, so gang,
Like, are your eyes stacked on top of each other or next to each other?
well, you take a 27-inch monitor, which is 2560 by 1440, and you put
Yeah.
that next to a 34-inch monitor, which is 3440 by 1440. Now, they're saying that you lost vertical space. Well, first, you didn't lose any vertical space. It's still 1440. But then I've actually heard people say, well, no, they physically make the monitor smaller vertically. No, they don't. A
Don't.
34-inch monitor has the same
Like,
vertical physical height of a 27-inch monitor.
that's my favorite thing about like the big ultra wides is if you're actually doing like a triple monitor setup, which doesn't always like triple monitor doesn't always work that great with all games. Like
It doesn't.
ultra wide you can get away with it on a lot of games. If the UI doesn't scale perfectly, it's still at least, within your field of vision. If you blow up across 3 monitors and the UI isn't set up to deal with it, like, you can't use it, right? Because you end up with, like, one half of the UI on like, way out there on one monitor and then the other half of it on the other monitor. And so what's really cool with ultra wides, if you want like a real, like also want to go into like a triple monitor setup, is you can have like a 34-inch ultra wide down center and then flank it with 27-inch regular aspect ratio, like 16:9 monitors, and the heights on all of them will match. Like the pixels will be the same size on all of them, so it stretches out really, really nicely like that. Because basically I'm guessing the way they manufacture those panels is they just take the panel that they would cut up into 16:9s and they just cut it into 21:9. So the pixels are the same size.
Or even the bigger ones. And
and then they have even the bigger ones, yeah.
It was just so funny though. I go into Reddit. Yes, I know it's a terrible place for me to go.
I go there way too much. I spend way too much time on Reddit.
You gotta wear hip waders and take a shower after a day in Reddit. But I go into Reddit and I see this discussion and somebody saying, "Oh, I don't do ultra wide monitors because they cut the height." No, they don't. Your aspect ratio changed.
It's literally like you take your 2560 and you add a bunch of extra pixels to the side of it. That's all that happened.
What I'm wanting is for them to do that with 32 inches. I don't know if there's a 32-inch equivalent. I want the 32 inches height, the 32-inch monitor's height, but then I want the extra width.
So like 4K 32-inch, but then wider.
Yes. In my case, I do 1440.
Oh, you'd prefer it in 1440. Okay, yeah, I don't think that exists.
Yeah, it doesn't. I've looked. I've tried to find one. So what happens is as you get older, your eyesight isn't as good.
Yeah.
But even that gets me then into pixel density discussion, which we've had on the podcast numerous times. Pixel density, people don't take into account the distance you sit from a monitor. That's why you've got people looking at now these 49-inch TVs with the OLED. Technically, the pixel density on them sucks, even in 4K. But because you have to sit so far back from it, it's irrelevant.
Yep.
And it's the same thing with a 32-inch monitor. 32-inch, even at 1080, if you sit properly back 3 foot or so, you can't see them.
At that point, you could have just sat closer to a smaller monitor, but
yeah. Well,
yeah, I guess depending on what kind of space you have to work with, I guess it might make sense.
I like my big deep desk. If my desk isn't 30 inches at least deep, I feel like it's tiny.
I like corner desk, so the depth of the desk changes as you.
Well, there is that.
Kind around it.
Okay, I can appreciate that. Okay, Decoy said, I want to point out that I didn't say there were a lot of great analog headsets. There weren't a lot of great analog headsets. Okay. And as was pointed out, wireless headsets are USB, and you're correct. Um, I've not found a wireless headset I'm thrilled with. Uh, there are some that aren't bad, but most of them are, well, all of them are what I call faux wireless because you got to have a recharge cable. Nobody makes a wireless headset that has replaceable batteries, so you really don't have to have a cable at all. I did use
I'm
the,
surprised that's not a thing.
yeah, me too. Well, it's
Like,
really irritating. I've got the Logitech keyboard and mouse set that does that. And the battery life on these things, the G603 mouse has a battery life of 8 months of use.
I
Okay,
think a mouse probably has like, because if you're making sound, I don't believe speakers are particularly efficient
no, they're not.
energy-wise.
You'd probably need four
So,
double A's instead of two.
true. And I'm
but
still not sure that you'd get that much lifespan out of it, but it would certainly be a lot more convenient.
Sennheiser makes a $200 wireless headset that has a 100-hour battery life from charge. And I've tested it, by the way. It really does last almost 100 hours.
That's
But
impressive.
the sound quality wasn't that good,
Oh
which
well,
was
I
a
guess that's how they got that
that was
battery life.
yeah, that was a big well, let me rephrase that. It's not bad, but when you compare it to any of the wired Sennheiser EPOS headsets, it's just not up to snuff. And that was a disappointment for me because I can get good Sennheiser and EPOS headphones for under $200. I mean, great ones. And yeah, the wireless wasn't worth the extra cost and losing a little bit of the sound quality.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, let's see here. Let's pick up another topic. Let me go find my OneNote, and let's find another topic and have some fun with it here. Okay, what are your thoughts on high-end gaming peripherals, specifically this this really weird market of crazy keyboards?
You mean like like when they have the full metal case and keyboard costs like $500
Yeah, and you
because
can replace the
individually
individual
replaceable switches and
switches.
yeah, yeah. So I love customization just in general with everything. Um and so from that perspective I get it. Like there's got to be people who, instead of just like I basically take it out on my computer and then on some of the games that I play. But, if you don't do it to your computer, then why not do it to your keyboard or
Right.
whatever else? So I can totally understand um like just wanting to have a keyboard that's like truly yours. I don't think it's necessary. Like I doubt. Well, like personal, like the keyboard I use is a Razer Black Widow that I got because it was on a really deep discount at the time that I bought it. That's basically the reason why I
A
have it.
man that buys like I do. Okay.
Yeah. Though the mouse, I do actually have a very specific preference. I always I love the Razer Naga mice. And
Okay.
so only those, because the shape and the fact that they have a bajillion side buttons is just perfect.
You see,
Like,
I can't use the side buttons. My
oh,
old fat fingers, those individual buttons are I always hit like two at a time. What I really miss on buttons, and you may not remember this. Did you ever use any of Microsoft when they were doing hardware for keyboards, mice, and stuff like that?
we might have had that at home, but I was too young to remember it.
Microsoft did a mouse called the Sidewinder, and they did something really unique with it. The side buttons, instead of being forward and back, were top and bottom. And they were these little round buttons that were easy to distinguish, easy to hit. Your thumb didn't have to stretch to one and then crank up to the other. I really wish somebody would bring out a mouse with that again. But yeah, I get the mice. You want to pick something that fits your hand.
Yeah.
and that's important to find that fit. I don't think you necessarily have to spend a lot of money to find that fit, but you want to find that fit. I've been comparing though here lately. I've got a couple of really nice $150 keyboards, and
Yeah.
I picked up a couple of $40 keyboards, and I can't tell the difference in using them day to day.
Yeah, I mean, like assuming that they're at least like Well,
Yeah, they're all
are the
mechanical.
$40 ones mechanicals?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I would. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Like, it's just a switch. It's not that complicated.
Yeah, it's
Um.
and well, people get excited about stuff like USB pass through. Um, I don't understand
But
the convenience of that because you
just
got to pick
get
up
a
your
USB
keyboard and look
extension
behind
cable.
it. And
I mean, my mouse has like a 3-meter cable on it, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
So most of it, like, I am using the pass through on my keyboard, but ultimately just to have a bundle of wire on my desk, anyways.
that's why I went wireless.
Yeah. And the thing is, I actually they've made Nagas in wireless, but they just never had the battery, like, never had a very long battery
Right.
life. So I've just kind of given up on that. Um,
So I got to ask another question before this started about because I'd mentioned that I'd moved away from high-end peripherals. I just don't I don't at the end of the day see the reasoning that people get. I mean I've made this comment a lot, by the way. I love how people will argue about these ultra light mice. How you got to get this weight down. You got to get the weight down. I heard a pundit say, and I went nuts on a video on Facebook about this. He said the ultralight mouse allowed him to have less hand fatigue while gaming. My
I can see that.
Yeah, dude, exercise your hand more. I've had gaming sessions of 4 to 6 hours. I'm on a heavy mouse with AA batteries in it, and I've never had hand fatigue.
What kind of games do you play? Just
Watch Dogs Legion, Mech
Legion.
Warrior, Doom. Uh,
Okay. Well, Doom's pretty fast, so I guess yeah.
I'm using a
Though I
mouse all the
think like I
time.
play like some of the like one of the arena shooters I play. If I go for like 4 hours, I can definitely feel like that I start slowing down towards the end of that. Um,
Yeah, but there's got to be a difference. But I
but
get if you
like
got a
I
really heavy mouse, okay, I can understand that. But
yeah.
but come on, a difference of 5 grams, and somebody's going, oh my God, that's so much.
Yeah, like the ridiculously like wasn't there one that was like made out of carbon fiber? I
Yes,
think it was on LTT, and it was basically unusable as an actual mouse.
I had Cooler
Did
Master
it even
sent
have a
me.
scroll wheel? I think it was like two buttons basically attached to a block, and that was it.
Cooler
Um,
Cooler Master sent me one of their mice. It's got that latest design that's so popular, and I put my hand on it, and I swear it feels like something I print on my 3D printer.
with the mesh
Yeah,
design.
it's
I've kind of wanted a mesh mouse just because like my hand tends to get really sweaty, and so I figured
okay.
like if
Now
like
that
I could see
makes
it helping
sense
with
to
that.
me.
The weight reduction, I guess if you're like the weight reduction, like I've not used one of those ultralight mice. But yeah,
Well,
yeah, so I can't really judge those. I don't feel like at some point you're gonna hit a point of diminishing returns where, you
yeah,
give up too much mouse for the next 2 grams of weight reduction.
I think
Um,
we should just spend more time exercising our hands.
um,
Use whatever comes to mind. That's okay. Uh, but you said about the sweaty hands. I don't know if you ever got to play with it. Thermaltake actually made a mouse that had a fan inside it,
yeah, I saw that.
and
No,
and
I never got
it
to
actually
try that.
worked. It really did what it was supposed to do. It kept you from getting sweaty on your hands.
Yeah. I actually experimented with like just jamming like a piece of cloth between my hand and the mouse body, because the thing is like the mouse body is just plastic, right? So
Right.
there's no ventilation whatsoever. um, and I palm my mouse all like quite tightly. So
Yeah, I'm a
yeah, and
palmer. I understand that.
even just adding like a little bit of cloth actually helped quite a bit with the issue. So I'd imagine the like straight up perforated mice would help a lot with that. But
Bolivian said, I don't personally care about the weight. I just want it to run high DPI. Now, I don't,
I
I
use
guess,
800.
yeah, I was going to say 800 and I use 1600 on my desktop. When I game, it's all 800. When I work on the desktop, it's 1600 so I can move around quick. I'm not sure why anyone would need 6 to 8,000 DPI.
One thing I
That's
wondered about is if you crank the DPI really high and then have the like OS rescale that to like a normal mouse speed, if that might not be more accurate for tracking. That's one thing I
that could
wondered
be.
about.
That could be. I'd like to see somebody actually
But
test that.
I I don't really want to mess around with that on my mouse because it feels like the like
You sneeze and your
I
mouse
wonder
is
how much it
crossed
can
four
crank down the
screens.
sensitivity in Windows. Because basically, if you crank up the DPI by say I don't know a factor of 3, then theoretically I would just have to set the OS sensitivity setting to 1/3 of what it normally is.
Right.
But the thing is, even at 800 DPI with my current settings, like a lot of games that I start up, I'm like all the way at the bottom of the sensitivity slider. Right? So it's like if I raise my DPI anymore, like what am I gonna do?
I understand. Let's see what else we
So
got here. Scorpio M said those super lightweight mice might be built for 12-year-olds. I don't know if you guys have ever played with one. You know the little bitty, they're so cute. The little bitty mouse Logitech made for laptops.
I think I had one of those. I
You,
had one of those because like I wanted a mouse that I could literally just shove in my pocket.
yeah,
It might not have been a Logitech, but it was one of those super tiny mice.
they're so cute. And they
Um,
actually are a lot more comfortable than you would think they would be.
I strongly disagree with that.
Okay, well, that's okay. That's, again, mice are.
Like the whole gripping the mouse with like your two fingers from the side and then your pointer and middle finger on the right click like
There you go.
that like yes that will hold the mouse securely, but I do not consider that a comfortable position because I
These,
am really used to just sort of like yeah palming my mouse a
I
lot.
understand. Visa said,
But I guess if you use a claw grip regularly, then that would actually work just fine. Yeah.
I can't stand a claw grip. It feels weird in my hand. So, Visa said, regarding expensive mice and keyboard, wouldn't it be more effective to spend the money on a good chair? I can attest to that. A good chair, wonderful difference, or a standing desk first. Now, this is interesting. Visa, believe it or not, I saw a study, a medical study about a month ago that talked about the so-called benefits of a standing desk are not nearly as much as they claim. Something about there's additional wear on the body, and the so-called calorie burn difference was only like 200 calories over the course of a day. Now,
Yeah, I feel like if you're considering maybe go walk more,
yeah,
you know,
get up and take a walk.
um,
I
which is
mean,
not something I do enough, but I've
um,
tried to get better about that.
Herman
Uh,
Miller makes a. Most people don't know this. Herman Miller makes a gaming desk, and their gaming desk does have a motor on it to raise and lower. But they actually, when I spoke to them about it, they told me they didn't expect people to use it as a standing desk. This allows, in combination with the chair's hydraulics, for you to achieve a perfect fit of desk height to your chair. Now that makes sense to me,
yep.
but that's a lot of money. I mean, their desk is like $1,300. That's no. I spent like $300 total and built me a gorgeous desk. I'm fine. Uh,
I'm on
let,
IKEA for furniture.
let's see. Yeah, IKEA desk. We spend $4,000 on a graphics card, and we got our desk from IKEA. Okay, that you bought it from IKEA because you don't have anybody to buy a desk. Um, let me
Yeah,
see
well,
here.
priorities.
let
if it's not a CPU, graphics card, motherboard, or like computer hardware, I'm quite happy to go with just as cheap an option as long as it doesn't like collapse on itself.
And there you go. And you guys got me off on a rail because I was going to mention with the discussion before the show about high-end peripherals, I was asked, did I consider monitors when I look at high-end peripherals and I've stepped back from them, and the answer is complicated because it's yes and no. I am slowly moving all my monitors back to 1080p for the reason I told you. My eyesight's gotten worse as I get
Right.
older. Now I'm not even close to blind, but even on a 32-inch 1440 monitor, I have to have a zoom set of about 125% for web pages to be really clear for me to
Right.
see. And I'm not going to pay for three different pairs of glasses, one for reading, one for the computer, and one for driving. So it's easier for me just to move to the lower resolution. But
Right.
I'm still going to buy a good monitor. I still want a high refresher. I don't want a nice panel.
Yeah.
And 1080p's got two other advantages. One, all these really cool new features we're getting, like ray tracing and stuff. Let's
Much
face it,
easier to run with less pixels.
you
Yeah.
you, you want to run 1080p, and then you don't have to upgrade your video card as often. You
Yeah.
can extend the life of your video card, or you can buy a less expensive video card. And I don't know. I'll give them a real quick shout out here. Cooler Master sent me their 27-inch 1080p monitor to play with. It's 165 hertz. Beautiful VA panel. It's got a curve, not much of one, but it's got a little bit of a curve. I'm not sure that's necessary, but for $250, this panel is a steal. It's gorgeous, and it runs at 165 hertz. In fact, it actually told me I could run it at 200 hertz. So, $250 for that. Save your money and get a good 1080p graphics card. You're set. Oh, let's see here. What else we got, guys? Give us some questions. We're coming up near the end.
Like with monitors, like my current main monitor is an IPS 2560 by 1080. And honestly, with some of the games I play, the RX 580 can't keep up. Which I think is mostly down to the fact that the developers probably developed their games on NVIDIA cards rather than the RX 580 not being able to drive the
True,
panel. But
true. Well, you,
yeah,
you
because
get
that's the awkward thing with indie games, isn't it? Is just
well,
you
yeah,
kind of gotta
indie.
hope that whatever graphics card you have is similar enough to whatever the developer used to make the game.
You could go back to a 286 and run onboard graphics. Come on.
Uh, yeah,
uh,
but
Lord
I've kind
Quack.
of wanted to upgrade to a 1440p ultra wide once I get the GPU swapped out because already like there's some games where I've just straight up had to like turn off certain effects,
I, I
namely
think
grass.
I think if I upgrade to a larger monitor, it's going to be one of these OLEDs, these 49-inch OLEDs. Because the nice thing about 4K is 4K gives you the real estate if you want it, but
Yeah.
because it's evenly divisible into 1080p, you can downscale and you don't get the blur.
Don't you need? Isn't there's a driver setting for that now, isn't there? Because I know like the integer, like a lot of monitors don't natively do integer scaling,
Right.
in my experience at least.
Well,
Like if
there
you
is
feed
for
them
for
something that's
in
a fourth of the
game.
resolution, they just blur it all to hell.
Yeah, there is for in game. I don't think there is for general monitor use. If I'm wrong, somebody let me know here. Lord Quack says he just builds everything for his desk and stuff out of cardboard.
Oh man, that reminds me when I first moved into my current flat. For like a few weeks, I was using the box that one of the monitors came in as a chair. I literally just sat on top of that.
There you
That was
go.
great. Very
Smoke
comfortable.
Smoker said that monitor had to be curved because Samsung is only making those panels in curve. That's interesting. Here's an interesting question: would you rather go 4K or ultra wide?
Ultra
Um,
wide.
if they
Not even a
made
question to me.
if they made an ultra wide with the right size for me, so that lowered the pixel density a little bit, made everything a little bigger, I would definitely go ultra
I think
wide
they
over
make
4K.
some pretty huge 1080p ultra wides.
Well, yeah, but then you're getting up to that big 49-inch thing, and the truth is, it's only
No,
basically
no, not
27
49 inches,
inches.
because like my ultra wide is 2560 by 1080, but 29.
Yeah,
I think they make a
they make a 32.
32
The
in
32
1080p
the
ultra.
32 is essentially a 27-inch monitor,
Yeah, in
and
1080p though.
and what I would like to find is a 32.
But right, so you'd actually want like an ultra wide that would be like, I actually don't know what that would rescale to. That would
Well,
be,
it would.
well, the 29 inch is like a 22 regular. So a 32 would be probably like a 39. Like if you wanted a 32-inch 1080p in ultra wide, then that would be like a 39-inch.
39 or a 40-inch, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's a really weird combination for monitor size,
There
though.
is, but you get up to a monitor that big, and that's why the 48-inch has appealed to me. That's going to be big and easy to see.
Yep.
And again, it's OLED, but OLED is something I'm still on the fence about.
I'm worried about the burn-in, especially since I tend to leave my system running just all the damn time. Like I imagine if I had an OLED, I would have destroyed it in like a month. They're just
Okay,
completely unusable with burn-in.
okay, guys, you got just a couple of minutes here before we sign off, and I want you guys to have a chance. Any specific questions or comments you got? Now's the time to bring them. 232 G7s and an ultra wide 38-inch. I've considered the 38-inch, but the problem with the 38-inch is the cost is just ridiculous. It I can buy a 48-inch 4K OLED for what it costs for a good 38-inch monitor. So looks like Hellbound is typing. If anybody else has got any questions, now's your chance. Okay, Hellbound says he's been using his OLED for 4 months. There's actually, I can't remember the link now. There is a site that did a 1 year burn in run on OLED, and it was 1 year to 18 months of really bad conditions before it began to burn in. So if you took proper practices, if you started a screensaver after a couple of minutes or had the screen turn off, and you make the toolbar disappear in the bottom, things like that, that'll help quite a bit.
Yeah, the thing is, to me, the monitor is kind of like, no, this got to be here and it got to run. I don't have to worry about it. Yeah, I don't think I could live with a monitor where it's like, oh, like even if it took a year, like that's not that long.
No, it's not,
Like
and
my current
that's
monitor, I've had it since 2015, and the only reason I'm really I'm considering an upgrade because it is kind of small at 1080p in my opinion, and the other thing is the bottom backlight has decided to start dying.
ooh, yeah, you're ready
So I
for a new
have big
monitor.
black splotches along the bottom edge of my monitor.
You're ready for a new
Uh,
monitor.
yeah.
All right.
Except like the thing is, priorities for me with purchasing is just primarily hardware to use for the channel. So things like I want a better monitor is kind of like, yeah, but a new CPU came out, gotta go buy new CPU. New motherboard came out, gotta go buy new motherboard. So the monitor upgrade's just been getting delayed basically eternally. I think I complained about the backlight dying like a year ago already I think on my own channel, that like my monitor's backlight is just going.
Speak,
And well, it hasn't gone out completely yet, so it's still usable. So
Speaking of which,
here we are.
before we go, what is your channel if anybody wants to find you?
So my YouTube channel is called Actually Hardcore Overclocking, and I do have a vanity link. So
Okay.
I'm actually going to drop that in the chat.
In the chat here
like,
for the listener questions. That's awesome.
Yeah. So my channel link.
So actual hardcore overclocking,
actually,
guys.
It's actually hardcore overclocking.
Hardcore
when I came up with that name, I was an edgy teenager would be the best way to describe it. So, that sort of comes from the whole like when you correct people on the internet, you always start the comment with actually
Yep.
no. It works like this. Um, so that's where that comes, like that's why the channel name is like that.
Okay.
Um, and I've just not been bothered to ever change it. Because also I think yeah, because there was quite a few sites that would have like that would have names that would imply that they actually cared about overclocking, and then you'd go there and it's like, no, they don't. So that's another part of where that channel name comes from.
I get that. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I'm going to presume nobody else has any questions. Thank you, Buildzoid, for taking some time out of your Saturday to spend with us. We appreciate it.
I had nothing better to do, so no problem. If you want to
Ow!
have me back
Ow!
anytime, I'm more than happy to be on the show again.
Yeah, but I had nothing better to do. Ow!
I mean, I meant that in the sense that I literally had nothing other to do. Like
All right.
nothing to do.
Well, you got
Therefore
video
literally
games you can go play.
yeah, but you can only play so many, like you can only play so much of any one game before you start getting bored of it. Or at least I do.
Well, that's why you have
Um,
to have a bunch of games.
well, but I've played all of them. And I blew all my money for games on RAM and motherboards.
There you go. Well, you need to start a Patreon and get people to help you get money just for video games.
Support my gaming addiction separately from my hardware addiction.
Yeah, there you go. Or do what I did. I've got a subscription to Uplay Plus. $15 a month every game they produce and all the DLC. It that wasn't meant to be a commercial, by the way. But it works. It's a simple solution. And then when I don't want to use it anymore, I just stop paying it and I come back to it when I'm ready to come back, and all my saves are still there.
Oh, that's neat.
So yeah, the subscription services are starting to become really interesting because you've got Microsoft, you've got EA, you've got Ubisoft, and those are some interesting things. It's really interesting to look at those. And I reactivated my Uplay Plus for two reasons. One, I wanted to play Watch Dogs Legion, and two, you got Far Cry 6 coming out next month. And so I don't
Yeah,
have to pay all that money for the fancy Far Cry 6. I get it because of my subscription.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like if I actually, did I even play any Ubisoft games? I might have.
Assassin's Creed.
No. The thing
Uh,
is, like early, like I feel like a lot of my gaming preferences come from the fact that my parents were extremely anti-video games. Like they would not buy games at all, or well, not at all, but to the best of their ability.
okay.
So if it wasn't free to play, I didn't play it. Like it was basically that simple. If I couldn't get it for free and it wouldn't run on a Mac because we were in an all Mac school
Oh
at the
my
time.
God, that's child abuse. Okay, we need to talk to your parents.
Like I
No
got
video games
grounded
on a
from the
Mac.
school laptops. I got grounded from using the school laptops because I got World of Warcraft to run on them.
Oh my God, I'm
Like
just
World of Warcraft naturally runs on Mac, but like, the fact that I installed World of Warcraft and played it on the school laptops was a serious problem. And of course, as I said, I couldn't pay any money, so I was playing on private servers at the time.
I'm trying to imagine a parent that would be so mean to their child as to not only not let them play video games, but making them have to use a Mac.
That was the school, though.
Oh,
That
okay.
was
Well, the schools are torture for kids anyway. So, all right. So on that note, we're going to get off of here, guys. Thank you all for coming out and joining us. Buildzoid, again, thank you for taking the time to join me on the podcast. This will be available for you on the Sapphire YouTube channel in a few days so that you can listen to it at your leisure if you didn't get to hear everything. So thank you for everyone for coming, and we're out of here until next month. Bye.